We begin with the Supreme Court today hearing a case that could radically reshape election laws in this country. Justices heard arguments on the controversial independent state legislature theory. That theory contends that state legislators and state legislators alone have the power to govern federal elections without traditional oversight. For more, I want to bring in my co-anchor and ABC's senior national correspondent, Terry Moran, along with Josh Stein, Attorney General for North Carolina, the state which brought forward this case. Josh, so glad to have you with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
All right, well, Josh, let's just start with you. And what do you make of this case, and what would it mean for your state?
I thought your articulation was spot on. It is one of the most consequential cases affecting democracy in our nation's history. And what the court has to decide is who has political power in America? Is it the people or is it politicians? Our state legislature is asking the court to give them unfettered power to draw congressional maps however they want, however discriminatory that they want, even in violation of the will of the people as expressed in our state constitution and as interpreted by our state Supreme Court. It is truly radical what they are seeking.
Yeah, Kira, that's exactly right. And Josh, I was listening to, as I'm sure you did too, the 3-hour-plus argument here. And we are in uncharted waters right now. There's just no question about it, because you could hear some of the justices grapple with this notion of an independent state legislature. And finally, someone said, there's no such thing. All legislatures are embedded in a state constitution. There's a governor who can veto bills. There's a state Supreme Court that can review the acts of the legislature under state constitutions. There are officers established by law, secretaries of state and other election officers who can have their responsibilities. All that would be erased if the plaintiffs win here, and it would only be this free-floating out in space state legislature that would have the power. So, Josh, I want to ask you, the group that filed this lawsuit, they said, don't worry, there will still be checks and balances on state legislatures if the court rules in their favor. What do you say to that?
I don't buy it at all. I mean, this takes us back to elementary school civics, that we have checks and balances in our state government. We have separation of powers. We have a legislative branch, an executive branch, and a judicial branch. What the legislature is asking the court to do is to lift them above the state constitution, which created them, and the state Supreme Court, which interprets that constitution. They want to have complete power, and that's to the detriment of the people. And we know this because in real life, we're experiencing it in North Carolina. In the last decade, they engaged in extreme partisan gerrymandering. We're a 50-50 state. They had a congressional delegation of 10 Republicans and only 3 Democrats. And they said the only reason that they didn't make it 11-2 was because that was impossible. In this most recent redistricting, the one that just occurred, the Supreme Court said, no, you cannot engage in partisan gerrymandering. And we had fair maps, and the people of North Carolina are sending to the United States Congress 7 Republicans and 7 Democrats. We're a 50-50 state. Our people are finally being represented instead of the politicians grabbing and holding on to power.
So, Josh, I had asked Terry this same question. One of the worries is that this independent state legislature theory could embolden election deniers to just ignore the will of the voters. And then there was this New York Times op-ed where the governor, who you know well, Roy Cooper, wrote that the case could, quote, upend democracy. So you just mentioned the word radical. I ask you, is this dangerous?
Yes, it's absolutely dangerous, because for our country to continue to thrive and grow and be dynamic and allow people to achieve their full potential, we have to maintain our democracy. I feel embarrassed to have to say these words out loud, but that's what these folks are willing to jeopardize in their pursuit of power. For our Republican legislative leadership, it's raw power over democracy. It's politicians over people, and that's flat out wrong.
And where this theory comes from, and it's a fairly recent development, is the Bush versus Gore case, which the whole country loves in so many ways, where the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court just stopped the vote counting in Florida because they said they were counting them unequally, and that was a constitutional violation. But I want to ask you, it comes from this independent state legislature theory from the Constitution's command in two places that elections, the time, place, and manner of elections in the states shall be determined by the legislatures of the states. And when they look at that, they say, well, it doesn't say anything about a Supreme Court, doesn't say anything about a governor vetoing anything, doesn't say anything except legislature, so why doesn't it just mean legislature? That's their argument.
Because the legislature only exists in North Carolina because of our state constitution. And it only operates according to the structure of our state constitution. And the other side even conceded today that if the governor has a veto right under that state constitution, then that is valid. What they're now saying, though, is that the Supreme Court is without any power to enforce the state constitution against an overly ambitious, power-hungry legislature. And they are our only source of protection. And that's why it truly is radical.